AI creates winners and losers, right? Productivity is income saved by companies that use AI and income lost by the workers that they no longer have to hire. It's a force that redistributes income within the economy, and can grow the economy.
If it raises productivity, it's going to be good.
As long as it generates additional benefits that go beyond just profit retention, then it's somewhat helpful for growth. So the question is how quickly that comes online versus these, I think, much more rapid rebound in inflation.
Yep.
I think
if inflation goes up, the flow could just hit the market really hard, even if this other stuff's true.
Because then the Fed has to pivot back from saying, okay, last year they just started printing a bunch of money again because of what they thought was a banking crisis. And now they're pivoting back and saying, actually, you know what? The bubbles come back as a result of that money printing. The inflation is now a constraint again. So we get liquidity tightening. So again, they will contract money. Those flows will come out of stocks and you'll get this derating. And it can still be true that AI wins and that there's a lot of sort of long-term benefits to this new technological wave, but that they've been overly discounted by a bunch of companies that ultimately will fail.
So the markets are going to need to adjust. If somebody, like a lot of my listeners are very exposed to tech, they're very bullish on the tech stuff. How else can you position yourself financially with your money that's not in tech? What are you doing otherwise?
So, this comes down to this concept, which is, do you invest just putting your money in the markets and seeing what they deliver? And that's beta. That's just taking what the market gives you. Or do you try to pick winners and losers, either domestically or abroad, within stocks or across assets, whatever you want to do, to try to figure out, even if the market's going sideways or down, I'm generating returns by picking the right assets. I would say that it's a bad time for beta because we've really pulled forward a lot of market returns this way, at least in real terms, because we sort of have to inflate the economy into these asset levels. But it's a great time for alpha because since so much flow has concentrated in so few assets in the world, it's left this whole range of other assets extremely dislocated from their fundamentals. And there's other shorts in the world. There's assets that are very overvalued in certain North Asian markets.
So you look for these extremes. Remember you were mentioning Turkish banks might be trading at 1.5 times earnings, and for structural reasons, no one's even been giving them money for 10 years. And that's interesting. Whereas these other extremes over here. So you find these spots that you measure as extreme based on the flows you measure. And so there's still lots of ways to be making money on macro, basically, even without having to buy or short the U.S. tech stocks.
Macro has been a challenged environment for 10 years because volatility has been suppressed by the central banks. They smoothed everything out. They've printed a bunch of money, created a lot of dislocations. So if they're not able to do that anymore because they have these other constraints, those dislocations will close, and it's time for sort of macro folks can come in and anticipate and pick these out to then benefit from those prices.
So we're bullish on macro for the next decade. It's a good time to be doing it.
Alpha-centric macro.
Alpha-centric macro. That's fair. Not exposure to beta. So we have here an interesting scenario that's not so bullish on America for valuations for the next 10 or 20 years because we've reached these extremes. We've showed some of them on the screen. These extremes are going to need to close. We started American Optimists, of course, to push back on cynicism and pessimism in our country. You're leaving me a little bit worried about some of the macro economy here, which is great to learn about and study because it seems like everything in the world is tied to this. What's the best case for an optimistic vision of the future? Like, how does this work out for us?
So the best case here is that if you go in history, right, we've had different hegemonic power centers. You had the British Empire, you had the Dutch before that, you have the US now. Obviously, go back, there's Rome. There's all sorts of different global superpowers. Typically, a new one takes over, or you start to get some sort of decay in the existing order when there's a lack of technological innovation. So the U.S. and also to some degree when you're overstretched from a military perspective, because then all your sort of opponents who don't want to be under your thumb anymore, they start to sort of test the limits and you can't respond to them all. So we're sort of in that area geopolitically on the, all of these fault lines globally are kind of buckling. But on the tech side, there's really nowhere else in the world that has the same set of technological innovation that the U.S. has, the same sort of drivers that create that. And so to the extent that we can preserve this leading advantage in innovating, and those innovations are increasingly important drivers of macro outcomes, then that's the best case. The question is just it's not to say that the internet won't exist. It's just that there was a bubble that then derated and the internet still existed and generated gains regardless.
Well, this is a great case for an optimistic scenario. Basically, from a macro and geopolitical perspective, we're in a huge amount of trouble if you just read the macro, and there's going to be a really tough 10 or 15 years ahead. But hopefully our friends in the technology world can save the day and innovate, and America can be strong again, which is great because we have people like Elon Musk and Palmer Luckey and others who are reinvigorating our defense and actually making it work despite, I think if you take away maybe 5 or 10 of the most important tech people, a lot of these really bad things do happen. Hopefully we're able to push this forward and fix things.
Yeah, and I think it's important that a lot of the available resource still goes to those sorts of people. Like in a bubble, it was very easy for everybody to get capital. And I think in order for this advantage to persist, that the people who have access to capital going forward in a more constricted pool of funding are the ones who have the best ideas. So this idea of having a meritocracy that underscores the innovation, I think is very
all right. Well, the pressure is on for us in the tech sector to solve these macro problems.